Bam, ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, 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 ba, bam, bam, ba, bam, bam. Do da dee dee da 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 dee da dee dee. Welcome to Rainbows Are Circles, a podcast exploring human potential and everyday wonder. What possibilities open up for us when we explore life with optimism, curiosity, and an open mind? Join me, Julie Malari, as we wake up to wonder and speak with inspirational guests on the topics of personal development, alternative health, and even magical, mystical, yet often misunderstood practices. Are you ready? Do 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 do. Ba be dee bee ba dee bee. Wow 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 wow. Negative self-talk, anxiety, low self-esteem, depression. Let's face it, people. As human beings, we've all got issues. We've all got them. And we're all just trying to work through them. I'm really excited about today's episode because our guest is going to be providing us with really simple and powerful tools to help us work through some of these issues and create positive change in our lives. We're going to be discussing energy psychology, a holistic approach to treating mental health conditions that sees the mind, body, spirit, and emotions as inextricably connected. To shed light on this topic, we're speaking with Dr. Adriana Popescu, a licensed clinical psychologist and empowerment coach with over 25 years of experience in the mental health field. She has found that energy psychology provides incredibly powerful tools to identify and eliminate deep-rooted causes of suffering and distress. Dr. Popescu is a certified hypnotherapist, access consciousness facilitator, and neuroemotional technique practitioner. Don't worry, we're going to be discussing what all of that means in this episode. Dr. Popescu has a private practice here in San Francisco specializing in addiction and trauma. She also travels around the world coaching and facilitating transformational workshops. She loves to empower people to overcome their perceived limitations, release their self-judgments, and discover their brilliance within. In this episode, we will explore: what does it mean to look at health in a holistic way? What is self-sabotage, and how can our subconscious beliefs block us from receiving what we truly want? How can false core beliefs that we form as children limit our potential as adults? What is access consciousness, and how does it work? What are some practical tools it provides to create positive change? Spoiler alert, mantras and visualizations. Lastly, we'll discuss how our ability to create life change actually just begins with our willingness to do so. Explore all this and more as we wake up to wonder with Dr. Adriana Popescu. Hi, good morning, Dr. Popescu. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm very excited to speak with you today about access consciousness and the bars. And I'd love to start out just by hearing a little bit about your story and how you got involved in therapy, in the type of energy work that you do. It's not the typical path for a lot of people, so I'd love to hear how you got on that path.
Okay, great. Yeah. And thanks for having me here today, Julie. I'm really happy to be with you and your listeners. How my journey started, I was one of those people who was really lucky to discover what it was I wanted to do pretty early in life. I was a teenager when I realized that I really wanted to help people feel better about themselves, and have someone supporting them in that. Some of my earlier life experiences were pretty difficult and painful with a very messy, ugly divorce with my parents. My father died when I was 15. And I really felt like I was on my own in dealing with all of that. Like none of my friends had gone through stuff like that yet. I didn't, in those days, going to a therapist meant you were crazy. So that was totally taboo. And I felt really alone and going through those experiences. And then as these experiences started happening to my friends, they would come to me for advice and support. And I was, really helpful to them. And I realized, hey, I could do this for a living. My dad had been a doctor, so I was already oriented towards the helping professions. And so I ended up, after college, I ended up taking actually what was supposed to be a year off just to get a break before I went to grad school for psychology, ended up turning into 5 years. And in that time, totally unexpected to me, I became extremely ill. And nobody knew what was wrong with me. They could see symptoms of chronic fatigue. I was getting depressed. I had a lot of physical stuff going on where I became like allergic to everything in my environment. I was chemically sensitive to all different things. And eventually, so that put me on a quest, right? Like my own health crisis put me on a quest to find answers and to find solutions for whatever was making me so sick. And that ended up really becoming my spiritual journey as well, because I ended up, Western medicine really didn't have much to offer me. So I was started looking at, it started with going to massage school and learning about my body. Because prior to that, I was like cut off from the, from the head down. I was in my head so much, I didn't even realize I like had a body, right? So, so I started getting in touch with my body, and I started doing chiropractic, and then went to acupuncture, and then, was just trying all these different modalities. I was living in Colorado at the time, and then eventually did apply for grad school in California and moved out here. I'm now in San Francisco, and was seeing alternative therapy practitioners. 13 years in, the doctors finally got a correct diagnosis of Lyme disease.
Mm.
But again, at that point, at that stage of the game, their only answer for me would have been antibiotics, like being on a PICC line, essentially, like having antibiotics constantly IV infused in me with perhaps little to no chance that will actually change anything. And I wasn't willing to go through that. So I kept seeking. And while in grad school, I saw a flyer for an energy psychology conference happening in San Diego. And I just got this intuitive, at that point, I'd had enough synchronistic types experiences to know that, oh, there's something here for me. And so I went, and it just opened up a whole new world for me. And it was through the energy psychology techniques that I was able to break through, where I would hit plateaus with the herbs and the homeopathy and the other, modalities I was using. I would hit these plateaus, and then I would do a piece of work around the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual stuff I had picked up from other people. Because what I didn't realize was part of what was making me so sick is that unconsciously I was trying to heal everyone and everything around me, not just my friends and family, but the clients I was starting to work with. I was taking on all their pain and suffering to the point that my body broke down and couldn't handle it anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these tools helped me to start feeling better and better. And so then, of course, I started using them with my clients. I ended up writing my dissertation on one of these tools. And then I would say by 2011, I was probably about 80% better with my symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Where I had been completely, by the time I was in grad school, I was like flat on my back. I mean, if the trajectory had kept going, I would have been completely debilitated and probably died from the Lyme disease and everything that came with it. So I was about 80% better. And then I discovered Access Consciousness through one of these telesummit, series. And I was really drawn to that work and started taking classes in it. And then realized like the final pieces of the puzzle had come to me at that point, realizing, I was taking on the pain and suffering of others and some of the other things that I learned from Access Consciousness and the Talk to the Entities work. That's a subspecialty of Access. Basically, I was able to cure myself of the Lyme disease, and I'm now symptom-free for however many years it's been, since about 2013 or so.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my journey. And so, of course, anything I learned from my own experiences, I shared with my clients and started, getting trained and certified in these different modalities, because I found so much progress and success with my own experience that I wanted to share that with others.
Okay. Wow. So, how much of your sickness do you think was related to the Lyme disease, and how much do you think was related to your taking on of other people's emotions and problems?
Well, I don't think you can separate them. So
Mm,
one of the things that is maybe a little different about how I work is that I don't separate the mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual. I actually see it all through one lens, which is the lens of energy, right?
mhm,
And so what I see is that energetic, and I would say this most closely ascribes to the traditional Chinese medicine, upon which a lot of the modalities are actually based. A lot of the energy psychology techniques are based on traditional Chinese medicine, which states basically that you have these different pathways in your body along which energy travels, and when you have a blockage in the energy flow, or you have not enough energy moving on a certain pathway or too much on another pathway, it creates imbalance and it creates dis-ease. And what the Chinese medicine doctors would do, like if you went to one of them with depression or anxiety, they wouldn't sit there and talk to you about your problems. They would be looking at how is the energy flowing in your body, where is it not flowing correctly, and then let's treat that. So they would use, let's say, acupuncture needles, right, along certain points to allow the energy to become unblocked, and then the body can heal itself. So
mhm,
the fundamental premise is that we have the ability to heal ourselves. We have to look at what's throwing us out of balance. And what throws you out of balance could be anything. It can be something like, yeah, you got bit by a tick and now you have a bacteria living inside of you that your body doesn't seem to be able to fight off. But it also can be related to what allowed you to, like, what choices did you make that allowed that to happen. And because there was a big part of me that didn't actually want to be here. There was a part of me that was actually trying to that I wasn't aware of, that was trying to kill my body so I could get out of here,
okay,
right?
that's deep.
But
Yeah.
that's more of a sort of mental, emotional, spiritual thing. Add on top of that, the body's getting overloaded by literally absorbing the energy, the pain, the suffering, the traumas of others. Put on top of it your own traumas, physical, mental, or emotional. All of those things are going to cause disruptions to the energy field, which if you do enough of that, the body will start to go wonky. Hormones will go out of whack. Neurotransmitters go out of whack. Organs don't function properly. And then you can see the kind of snowball effect that comes from it.
Right. Okay. So, you've already talked a little bit about energy psychology, but for those of us who are completely new to that concept, can you explain what energy psychology is?
Yeah, it's really just a more holistic approach to treating, mental health conditions. So if it's something, again, like depression or anxiety, we're not just looking at what are you thinking that's creating that emotion, which is sort of the traditional psychology approach, but we're also looking at what are the physical aspects of it. What might be imbalanced in your body, or how could we work with your body to restore some of that balance? And then what about the spiritual? What about, connection to everything from connection with yourself and your body to connection with others, connection with something greater than you, a higher power, the universe. You know, what are you doing here? What is your mission or your purpose in life? Those kinds of more, I don't know, existential sort of philosophical concerns. That plays a role because depression affects people on every level.
Mhm.
My perspective, as most people who practice this work, is you can't just address one element of it without addressing the others. You can't just give someone a pill like an antidepressant and think that that's magically going to fix all their problems, because it won't. It's not going to change the way they're thinking about themselves. It's not going to change the traumatic experiences they've had. It's not going to change a fundamental feeling of brokenness or defectiveness they might be walking around with. A pill's not going to do that.
Mhm.
So this fragmented health system that we tend to have here in the West and in America doesn't always serve people well, because you have to go to this doctor for that. Then you have to go to like the priest or the spiritual counselor for that. And then you go to the head shrink for that. And it's nobody's really looking at it all holistically. And I
Mm.
think that's the difference with energy psychology, is that we are looking at all those aspects and we have tools and techniques that address them all.
Okay. So if you had a patient or a client come to you with, let's say, depression or chronic fatigue, how would you go about assessing what they need?
Right. Well, I mean, you talk to them first and foremost, right?
Mhm.
Get as much of the background info. I often will have clients, make sure they get a checkup or get blood work done. I mean, because a lot of times what shows up as depression might actually be a thyroid imbalance or a vitamin deficiency, right? So let's make sure that there's not some physical imbalance stuff going on. Or, I might send them to an acupuncturist or something like that. But a lot of it is just getting a really good history and getting an understanding for what are their symptoms
Mhm.
and how have those symptoms impacted their life in a negative way. And then from that, because I have so many different modalities and tools, um, usually I just get an intuitive hit. I've been doing this for long enough, 25 or more years now, that I get the intuitive hit. And then I can also muscle test, which is one of the tools that we use in energy psychology. Chiropractors also use it a lot. We can muscle test the person to see what actually is required. There's a particular modality called NET, neuroemotional technique. It was funny recently, it was on an episode of Grey's Anatomy when I went and had a session with a therapist. And so it was cool. Like that was really great publicity for NET. Where we actually are able to do that. So someone might come in and say, I have this like recurring pain in my shoulder that doesn't seem to go away, or this, like a gut issue or something like that. And I can muscle test them and see if they have actually an emotional component that's happening with this condition that's either causing it or correlated with it. That if I can work through the protocol and get clear on what that emotion is and where it's coming from and like the root of it, and then we do a thing to change the energy around the root cause of it, then typically that will go away. That pain will go away. That emotion it's usually an unresolved trauma or upset from the past that we're still holding in our bodies, because that's what we do, especially as children, when we don't understand the things that are happening, and we don't really have good tools to cope with emotions. What we'll often end up doing is repressing them, and they get locked in our bodies. I learned this from being a massage therapist. I would, do massage on people and they would burst into tears. And I was like, what, why, what happened? And it's because their bodies were holding all this trauma that they had experienced. And then when they finally felt safe enough, or you touch a certain spot, all this emotion will come out.
Right. That's why sometimes when you're practicing yoga, it can be also very emotional.
Yes. Yoga is a holistic practice. It really is mind, body, spirit, emotions as well. That's the original, intention of yoga as it comes from India.
Mm-hmm. So everything is connected, mind, body, spirit. And if you have some sort of, let's say when you were a little kid, you had some sort of trauma, that affects not just your emotional system, but also your physical and your nervous system. And so when you do this NET, this neuroemotional technique, that's reflected in the way that their body physically responds. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can go in through the body, but you can also, interestingly enough, you can also go in through the mind, or through an emotion. So you could start with the pain in the shoulder, or you could start with a statement. Like, for example, let's say that a client wants to work on money issues. And then, so I might muscle test them to see if they are actually okay. So let's say they're saying, I want to make $10,000 a month. And so I can muscle test them to see if they're actually energetically congruent with that statement. And if they are not, that's telling me, okay, so they've got a subconscious belief that's blocking them from being able to create that, right? Because if you say, okay, I want to, or my drug and alcohol clients, I'm okay being sober. I'm okay never taking a drink again. They say that, they say they want that, but most of them, if you actually muscle test, you'll find out that they're not congruent with that statement. And so then this technique allows us to get clarity around what is it then that the person isn't even aware of that's getting in the way of them being able to accomplish that. So it might be something like a fear. Like, I'm afraid that if I have that much money, or that if I stop drinking, who would I be? I would lose a sense of my identity, or I might lose my friends and family. or people are going to come after me for my money, or I won't know how to cope with my stress without a drink. Like any of these other kinds of points of view that our subconscious mind might be holding on to, that doesn't allow us to actually follow through on. And so we'll end up self-sabotaging, right? We'll make it so that, we never do get that $10,000 or be able to really stop drinking.
So with neuroemotional testing, what might it look like? Let's say somebody comes in with money issues. What might the test look like that would indicate an issue?
Yeah, a weak muscle test or a strong muscle test. So basically the way that works, it's called applied kinesiology. It's basically that they're involuntary muscle contractions. This is the stuff that they actually do with lie detector tests. And this is also how they train military and police and FBI agents when they're questioning people. They're looking for little contractions, little twitches in the muscle. Because when you are saying something that isn't actually true, your body will do these involuntary muscle contractions. And I mean, of course, like if with enough training and stuff, if you really wanted to, you probably could override it. But, generally speaking, if you push down on someone's arm while you say a true statement, the muscles should stay strong. So if I say, right now I'm in San Francisco, California, and you push down on my arm, it'll stay strong. If I say, right now I'm in New York City, my arm will involuntarily, like totally beyond my control, my muscle will go weak and the arm will drop. And so that's what we're using. We're using that to basically bypass the cognitive, logical mind and get to the subconscious mind.
Okay.
All our beliefs and everything lies.
Is this similar to, I think when you're lying, your eyes tend to look a certain way, and then when you're telling the truth, your eyes tend to look in a different direction?
Yeah, it's probably the contractions of your eyeball. Yes. It's a similar thing. They can see it in faces. The FBI people, police, they're looking for twitches in your face and the muscle. Yeah.
Okay.
So eyes would be included in that.
So interesting. Okay. So, I was reading your website, and one thing that you mentioned is the root cause of unhappiness for a lot of us, the majority of us, is low self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I would even distill it down even further and just say judgment. That judgment is actually, and I've said this many times, I wrote a blog post about it as well. Judgment is the greatest source of human suffering. And by judgment, I mean the categorization of everything into right and wrong and good and bad. It's if you want to go spiritual with it, it's really the duality that the Buddhists will talk about. So instead of functioning from the concept that we're all oneness and we're all connected, we function from a polarized view that it's either right, wrong, or good or bad, which is actually an invention. Like if you go out in the natural world, you don't see judgment. You don't see trees going, oh, I'm so ugly today, or birds I can't possibly go out and sing because, the other birds will think I'm not good enough. Like only humans do this, right? It's a human construct, and it's an ego construct. It's a construct of your ego mind to polarize things through this, seeing it through only one lens or the other. It's very black or white thinking. And so when people actually, if you look at children, they're not born with this. They're not born with a sense of right or wrong at all. It's something we teach them. It's Don Miguel Ruiz, the guy who wrote the Four Agreements. He talks about it as the domestication of the human. Right. You get told how you're supposed to be. Little girls are supposed to be like this. Little boys are supposed to be like that. You have to walk in a single file. You're not allowed to go to the bathroom without raising your hand. We're given all these rules around how we're supposed to be in the world. And what ends up happening for children is that they don't have a very sophisticated, complex thinking until they become teenagers. And so little kids function from a point of view of if I'm good, I get rewarded. If I'm bad, I get punished. That's what we teach them. So if a child experiences something like trauma, like let's say they're being abused in some kind of way, they're going to think, well, I must be bad. The reason this is happening is because I'm bad, right? They
Mm.
can't understand that, oh, maybe mom or dad has a problem. Maybe they're an alcoholic. Maybe they have their own issues and they're putting that on me. They won't understand any of that until they're far older. They'll just think I'm bad. So if you got sexually abused as a child, it's my fault. I'm bad. I'm wrong. And so that
Mhm.
becomes a core belief, right? You have no other way to make sense of your experience but to assume it's because you're bad. And so then once you believe you are bad, it's like, this is now like law of attraction. You will attract people and situations to you that will mirror back to you that belief that you're bad, you're wrong, you don't deserve to be happy, you're not a good person. And so you'll start acting in congruence with that belief. And so
Right.
you can imagine across a lifetime, if someone continues to function from that belief of I'm not enough, which is what you see in so many people, the vast majority of people, they're not gonna be able to make that 10,000 a month. If they discover that drinking helps them feel a little bit better about themselves or gives them some reprieve from that shame that they feel so deep inside, because that kind of belief would create a lot of shame. Then they're not going to be able to stop drinking as long as they still feel that way about themselves.
Mhm.
Right. So,
Right.
what I like so much about these tools is that they're a really effective way to access those core limiting beliefs, which are actually not even true. And then we get to challenge them with the logic and reason of an adult. We can say, well, wait a minute, let's really look at that. Was that really about you? Or that did the person who abused you maybe like have some issues of their own? Right? And then we can put it into context and we can bring logic and reason into it. And that's great. That's what traditional therapy does too. But with energy psychology and with access consciousness, we're actually going after the original energy that got locked into your body, into your subconscious mind. When you came to believe that I'm not a good person or I deserve these bad things, we're literally undoing the energy around that belief and everything that came from it, and basically collapsing it and undoing it so that it no longer functions as this charged point of view, so that you're able to say, yeah, that was an awful thing that happened to me, but I didn't deserve it and I'm not a bad person, and now I can create something different with my life if I don't function from that belief anymore.
Mhm. Do you feel with most of your clients when you're doing this work, are there multiple moments in their lives when they started to embody this energy and these beliefs? Or is it usually one core moment and then everything else kind of snowballs?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, and then it can get into really interesting territory if you start looking at other lifetimes and things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, because I will do that work with clients that are open to that and believe in those kinds of things. Because what I have found is that we do these karmic things where we'll repeat these patterns over and over again, whether it's in one lifetime or across lifetimes, because you are holding on to this like core belief, and it keeps causing you to create your life in a way that you're going to repeat the same traumas over and over again. I mean, we know that children who have been abused have a much greater probability of ending up in a domestic violence kind of relationship when they get older, right? They're just going to
Mhm.
keep repeating those same, see, I don't deserve to be happy, or I don't deserve to have a good partner, so I'm going to pick these abusive people over and over and over again.
Mm.
Right? So yes, I think you have multiple traumas that can get enacted, but oftentimes you can locate an original event or one that was significant enough that really did a lot of damage. The one that really ruptured, that event that really ruptured you on some level, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Like it caused you to you know, how can there be a God in the world if something like this could happen? Like, something really
Mm.
devastating that just shatters your whole world, right? Like, oftentimes there is an event like that in someone's world that you can locate and then do some healing work with these tools around it so that it doesn't continue. It's almost like, they got stuck in that. That's what PTSD is. It's like they got stuck in the trauma and like they never really got out, and they're still functioning from it as if it's still like happening for them.
Mm. Do you think most people are consciously aware of those moments?
It's a mix. I mean, most of
Yeah.
the people who come to me tend to be people who have had done some work on themselves, and they just haven't been able to get to the root necessarily. They'll have an idea that this thing happened to me, and I know it was traumatic, but they don't really realize the full impact of it, and they don't understand how it's still affecting them now because they're not, it's subconscious stuff. all our programming, our traumas, our beliefs, all this stuff sort of resides in our subconscious. And most people don't have access to that. They'll be able to say, I feel bad about myself, but they won't necessarily be able to pinpoint why.
And the work that you do with people helps them to access those things.
Correct.
Okay.
And challenge them and question them and reframe them and change them.
I would love to talk more about ancestral work and healing, but I feel like that is a rabbit hole we could really go down. So maybe let's jump into access consciousness and the bars. For those of us who aren't familiar with access consciousness, what is access consciousness?
Access consciousness is a set of tools and techniques that are designed to empower people to know that they know. So it consists of verbal facilitation as well as hands-on energy work. And it's been around for about 30 years, was developed by a guy named Gary Douglas, who himself was a seeker. And then about 10 years after Gary got started with Access, Dr. Jane Heer, who was also looking for something to give him a reason to live. He had been actually very depressed and suicidal at the time. And he asked the universe, give me a reason to be here or else I'm offing myself. And then, synchronistically, like a week later, he found Access Consciousness. He had his bars run for the first time, and then he never felt suicidal again. Bars is sort of the entry-level hands-on energy work, which basically consists of lightly touching these 32 points on the head. You go to a practitioner and they are the person who's touching these points on your head, many of which I'm sure actually overlap with acupuncture points, since all the meridian pathways end in the head. But as you're doing that, it's balancing the energy fields in the body, and it's also releasing the electromagnetic charge that gets created by our thoughts, feelings, emotions, judgments, all of that polarity I was talking about that gets created when we are always looking at things through the lens of right and wrong and good and bad. And so as you're able to dissipate that energy, what happens is, and they've actually hooked people up to EEGs and looked at brain waves and stuff, and they see that what happens is the brain waves will slow down to that theta wavelength, which is the wavelength of deep meditation, hypnosis, that hypnagogic state, like right before you fall asleep. And so people get really relaxed. And in that state, they're able to release stuff, emotional stuff. There also is, they've seen on the EEGs that there's more coherence between like left side, right side of the brain. So the brain is functioning more as a whole instead of more fragmented. So it balances how the brain is functioning. And people have some really cool results. Some people can get really great results from just one session. For me, my first time getting my bars run wasn't necessarily, anything that stands out. But over time, with getting my bars run over and over again, and I get my bars run at least once or twice a week, it's really become part of my self-care. And what I've noticed over time is that I'm just so much more calm and centered. I don't get riled up. I'm not so jacked up emotionally. My head isn't like head tripping on all the time, like a hamster on a wheel. There's a lot more peace and ease in my world with these tools.
What kinds of changes have you seen within your clients using the various modalities that you offer?
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes someone will come to me with like a particular problem, like let's say it's a relationship or a breakup from a relationship they don't seem to be able to get over, some heartache or something. And they initially come in for that, or a pain in their shoulder or something. And then we use some of the tools, and pretty quickly, within a few sessions, people are already feeling relief from the original issue. And they're so impressed with the tools, they're like, okay, well, what else could I work on? So then it might move into, from a relationship issue, it might move into work, or what they're doing with a business they're trying to create. I work with a lot of, entrepreneurs and people who have their own businesses, and it might turn more into like, how can I be more successful with my business? Or, there's so many, I work with so many different people. Obviously I have a specialization in addiction and trauma. What I've seen there is people sustaining long-term sobriety and freedom from horrible traumatic experiences that no longer have the same effect on them that they used to have. Mm-hmm. So I see people feeling stronger, setting healthier boundaries, in terms of like getting out of abusive situations. I see them feeling better about themselves. I see businesses that they've created like blossom in really, really cool ways. I've seen them find partners that are like honoring and caring of them, and that they can really like create a cool partnership with. I've seen people with health issues. God, I've worked with a bunch of cancer patients in the last few years, and I've seen them move through their treatments and get better and have an easier time with it than I've seen others. And I've seen people have a total turnaround with a life-changing, illness like that their whole life changes, their whole perspective on life changes, and their priorities and everything is different because they've had this experience.
Mm-hmm. I've
seen people have happier and healthier relationships with their children, people who are parents and were having a hard time parenting their kids. I've seen people just move more into this space of allowance, which is a space where there's less judgment, where they don't have to beat themselves up for being a bad parent, or they don't have to beat themselves up for that stupid thing they did in the past, where they're able to really put the past behind them and create something different in the present and for the future.
Okay. Wow. Have you seen any clients or any situations or issues that have been really difficult or that you haven't been able to help with the tools?
Well, I think that yes. And I think that fundamentally comes down to like, what is the person's willingness to change it? I remember a guy who came in, I remember a couple of situations actually. I remember a guy who came into the drug and alcohol treatment program I was working at with depression and a drinking issue. And he was very much, I would say, suicidal like the whole time I was seeing him, in the sense that he couldn't see a reason to live. He couldn't see, he wasn't really connected to anyone. He had no joy in his work or in any activities. He really just didn't want to be here. And I remember doing every trick under the sun I could think of, every tool, every strategy. I worked with him for over a year. And, at that time, I was just, this was early in my career. I was still learning the tools myself. And I was just like, gosh, why can't I help this guy? Why aren't these tools working? And I realized it's because he didn't really want to change it. And in the end, he actually did commit suicide. And I remember thinking, gosh, did I miss anything? Like, what could I have done differently? And I realized there wasn't anything I could have done differently. And I had a real gift came to me. So I have some capacities with perceiving spirits. And I was actually in a workshop where we were doing some of this work, and I felt his presence. This is after he had, some period of time after he had died. I felt his presence right over my shoulder. And I was like, whoa, it's you. Wow. Okay. So he's like, you know what? You were right. Cause he didn't believe there was anything after death. He's like, you were right about that. And I go, well, are you happy now? Like, how is it for you? He's like, I'm actually finally at peace. Thank you for being there for me, and just being there for me. That's all he really wanted, was for me to be there and just listen to him. I was the one person he actually felt supported by, and that he actually felt supported by to make the choice to leave. And that was a really lovely, like, beautiful thing that I got, that like affirmation and confirmation from him. So, we can't have an attachment to the outcome. That's the thing I've learned as healers. If someone is willing to change something, these tools will work to change it. If they're ambivalent about changing it, these tools will work to help them resolve the ambivalence. But if they're dead set against changing it, like my mom is another example, severe rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, she was only willing to use Western medicine, pills and things the doctors told her. She never was open to the alternative therapies I would try to use with her. And so she didn't get better. There was nothing I could do about that.
Right. Wow. I got chills when you told that story.
Yeah.
Do you think that when people don't want to get better, do you think that they're meant to leave this lifetime?
Well, I don't really believe in that kind of, if you mean like fate and destiny, like they're meant to, like it's predestined. I don't believe in that. I believe in choice. And I think those people are making a choice. not conscious or not. The choice isn't always conscious, but the people are making a choice to not change. I really do get that in this day and age, with all of the tools and techniques and therapies that are available, even free help. There's free helplines for people, like in San Francisco, we have so many services to help the homeless. Like, there is no excuse. Like, if you have a problem or an issue that's debilitating you in some way, the help is out there. If you don't reach for the help, that's on you. You're making that choice. Or if you go for the help, but you're not actually willing to receive it, you have blocks up to it. You believe, oh, this isn't going to work for me. Then it's not going to work for you. But it really comes down to a choice.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You mentioned earlier that one of the main things that causes us to suffer and causes unhappiness is our human tendency to judge. Why do you think that we have that because it's something that in our lives we're meant to work through and overcome?
Yeah, I think what ends up happening is you come in as the infinite being you truly be. Children come in bright, shiny, happy, joyful, curious, very much in the present moment. They don't think about the past or the future. If their brother or sister punches them in the head, they cry for 5 minutes and then they're best friends again playing. They don't hold grudges and they don't worry about the future. These are all things that children learn through that conditioning that I talked about earlier, right? And so then they get conditioned with all these beliefs, and they pick up the beliefs of their parents or other caregivers, and they pick up things from schools and churches and culture, and things like you're supposed to look like these models in the magazine and movies and all of that. We get brainwashed with all of that junk. And then what I see in my practice is the toll that takes on people, to where it can really create a lot of suffering and pain and suffering in their lives. And then they come to me, and then we have to unlearn it all. That's really what it is. You have to unlearn all that junk that you were brainwashed with and reconnect with the essence of you as a child that's been there the whole time. But it's almost like that light that you come in with, bright, shiny, happy, gets eclipsed by all these beliefs, by your traumatic experiences, by just the pain and suffering in the world, especially if you're an empathic person, highly sensitive empath like I am. You just get overwhelmed with it all. And then I think, yes, then you spend, the rest of your life trying to undo all that to regain some of that happiness and some of that connection and joy that, is in there, but that maybe you've lost access to.
Mm-hmm. For people who really resonate with that, people who have lost that connection with their joy and with purpose, or have low self-esteem, are there any tools that you'd recommend that they could do on a daily basis?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I would recommend. I'd actually make a plug for some of the conscious recovery and conscious being work that my colleague and I, TJ Woodward, have done some work with, especially this unlearned, like the stuff I'm talking about with core false beliefs, as he calls them, and unlearning them and practicing spiritual principles. All of that is outlined in his books, Conscious Being and Conscious Recovery. And together he and I co-authored the workbooks for that. I think that's some really good material for looking at the spiritual aspects of this. Conscious recovery is oriented more towards addiction, but honestly, there's so much content in there that applies to everybody. I think that's really useful. Other tools and techniques, I would say the use of a question. Questions are a big part of access consciousness. Questions create more possibilities, where answers are more conclusions, and they actually stop the flow of the energy. Like, a question will expand energy. Like, when you ask a question like, what else is possible? So let's say you're feeling really bad about yourself, right? And you're stuck in this kind of energy around that. You could ask, well, what else is possible here? How else could I be looking at this? What's right about me that I'm not getting? That's one of my favorites. Or what's right about this situation that I'm not getting, right? What would it take for the situation to turn out greater than I could ever imagine? So how does it get even better than this? That's a great question to ask when things are crappy. When these are crappy, you can say, well, what else is possible? How does it get any better than this? And then when things are good, you want to say, well, that's awesome, universe. Thank you. And what else is possible? And how does it get even better than this to keep the energy expanding into something else? Okay. Mm-hmm. So the use of a question is great. And I could say a ton more about that. But asking questions, and is it true? Like when you're thinking really negatively about yourself, I mean, this is standard cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, what evidence do I have that actually supports this? And what evidence do I have that doesn't support this? Like you could, if you're working with an idea like I'm a failure, well, is that really true? Have I failed at every single thing in my life? Can I find even one success in all of that? Because if I can find at least one success, then I'm not a failure, right? But again, that success failure speaks to that polarized, right and wrong, good and bad. It's either or, black and white. So what's beyond all that? That's another question you can ask. What's beyond all this judgment of myself? What's beyond beating myself into oblivion with these judgments? What else is possible here? So I like the use of questions. And then I like a tool called Expand Out, which I would love to walk you through and you and your listeners through.
Yes.
If that's okay. Yeah. So now, so it's a little bit like a guided meditation. So imagine right now, just, take a deep breath or two.
Okay.
Just take a moment to kind of connect with your body and just be present in this moment. And now imagine that your energy field expands out, like your aura or whatever you want to call it, expands out past your body and fills the room that you're in. And now keep letting that energy field expand out in all directions until you're as big as the whole building that you're in. And then keep expanding out, including down into the earth and up into the sky until you're as big as the entire city you're in. And then keep going until you're as big as the entire state or province you're in. And then keep expanding out in all directions, including down into the earth and up into the sky, until you're as big as the entire country you're in. And then keep stretching and expanding until you're as big as the entire planet. All the way down to the molten core, radiating out. And then go even bigger, bigger than the earth, big as the whole solar system, past the sun, past all the other planets, expanding out into our galaxy, and getting bigger and bigger, moving through and past the hundreds, thousands, millions, even trillions of other galaxies that science tells us there are, all the way out into the infinite reaches of the universe, which is ever expanding. This is the space of you as the infinite being you truly be. Some might call it a soul, a spirit. It's the part of you that goes beyond this time and place, this body, this particular identity. It's the part of you that you're born in. When I talk about that bright, shiny, happy being, this is you here as the infinite being you truly be. From this space, notice what it's like. What happens to thoughts and feelings? What happens to those judgments you have of yourself? What happens to the stresses, the traumas, and the dramas? Do any of them have the same meaning or significance? Or are they just a little speck of sand in a vast desert? Just notice what that's like. And then see if you can maintain this expanded space of awareness as you also bring your attention back to present time, the room you're in, your body. And whenever you feel ready, staying as much as you can with that space as you gently open your eyes. So, Julie, what did you notice with that?
I noticed a sense of lightness, and I could sort of view some of the thoughts and worries that I've been having this week, because it's been a little bit of an emotional week, and just see them with a little bit more perspective and see how a lot of the worries that I have are just made up, and they seem so much smaller.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're moving past the judgments. The only reason it's a problem in the first place is because you've decided it's a problem. You've invented it as a problem. You have a point of view, that judgment that says, oh, this thing is happening and it's bad. I would say, what's right about it that you're not getting? What if it's exactly what's required right now to create something greater for you? What would it take for whatever you're going through right now to turn out greater than you could ever imagine?
Mm.
That's the thing. And this is what really, like, with people who meditate, this is the space they're trying to get to. And the idea with meditation is that you keep practicing accessing that space, that ability to observe. What you were able to do, Julie, is you were able to observe your thoughts and your feelings. You recognize, I am more than just my thoughts and my feelings, right?
Mm.
If you practice being in that space more and more of the time, see, like I used to do meditation, but I don't actually do it anymore. I just expand my energy field out, and then I instantly connect with that infinite being, and I function more and more from that space. It's just become a way of being.
And do you feel that you live from that space pretty consistently, or does it just take practice to get there?
It takes practice to get there. And I don't even know if it's really a getting there. It's more like reconnecting with what is and who you really are. It's more a rediscovery of yourself, right? And once you peel away what's not you, it's really easy to stay in the space of what is authentically you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken me time to get here, no doubt. And at the same time, with the tools, I've seen some pretty miraculous changes in people in a very short period of time. Some people just need a little reminder and to access that part of themselves. And it's like everything, like a domino effect. Everything starts to change after that.
Hmm. Do you think that the issues that people go through at any particular time are theirs because they're meant to move past them and learn from them in order to grow?
I think many of us will create problems, traumas, dramas for that reason. And I don't think we need to either. I think if you're functioning more from the space of your infinite being, you don't need to create suffering for yourself. You could just get the awareness that you need without having to go through the trauma and drama to get there.
By using a tool such as the one we just did.
Well, yeah, which is a tool to access that. I mean, really, like, here's the deal. The bottom line with access consciousness with the tools, the way I see it is that the tools are all just training wheels to teach you how to access your own knowing. Once you're functioning from the space of your own knowing, your infinite perceiving, knowing, being, and receiving, everything gets easier. And you recognize that all those problems, traumas, dramas, whatever, you don't need them. You don't actually need to create them. So there's a lot less suffering that I see.
Mm-hmm.
And that I will personally experience.
Right. There is one quote that I read on the Access Consciousness page, and I'd love for you to share it with our listeners. I think it goes something like, all of life comes to me with ease, joy, and glory, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It's the mantra of Access Consciousness, actually. All of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory, which is meant to, it really is not like a Pollyanna statement, like my life is sunshine and roses. It's not meant to be that. It's meant to acknowledge that, hey, look, the shit might still hit the fan, so to speak, but you're choosing to handle your life and move through life with ease and joy and glory, right? Because like I sort of was saying with you, it's like, yeah, you're going through some difficult stuff this week. And like, what's right about all that? And what if you could move through it with ease and joy and glory, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it's like, right? And I find that if I say that statement, the suggestion in Access is say it 10 times in the morning, say it 10 times at night, and it'll start to really change your life. Because what you're doing is you're tapping into the ask and you shall receive. Access functions from the point of view, like it even says actually in the Bible, ask and you shall receive, law of attraction. If you ask for ease, joy, and glory to show up in your world, it will. And you may need to have more ease, joy, and glory, you might need to look at the stuff that's getting in the way. You might need to look at those core beliefs, because you're probably not going to allow ease, joy, and glory into your world if you don't think you deserve it. So we might have to first clear. So Access is about clearing and creating. We want to clear limiting points of view, blocked energies, stuck spots, whatever it is. We clear those energies so that we can create ease, joy, and glory. Because it's all a choice.
That is so powerful.
It's great stuff.
Yeah. I've learned so much in this last 45 minutes. Are there any final thoughts or words that you'd like to leave with our listeners before we wrap up today?
I think I love the exercise that we did. I think that created, the more you guys can access that space, that, that's you. That's who you truly be. Not the BS that your family, schools, whatever told you. It's like, find out what's really true for you. Like, who are you truly? Who do you want to be? If you don't like who you've been up until now, you can change that. With these tools, what I love the most about the tools of energy, psychology, and Access is that if you look at it through that lens of it's all energy, all our thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences, it's all energy. The good news is energy is malleable. It's constantly moving and shifting. It never stays the same. Everything will eventually change. And so if you want something to be different, if you find yourself stuck in something that's not working, there are tools and techniques there to change it.
Yes. Oh, Dr. Popescu, it has been so wonderful speaking with you, especially with your background in not just Eastern modalities, but also in Western therapy, and the way that you're able to bring these together and see things from a very expanded point of view feels very powerful and beneficial for us and for, I'm sure, your clients. So thank you so much. It's been really nice hearing you speak, because I can hear your excitement and your passion for your work whenever you speak about this. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes. Thank you so much for letting me. I'm so grateful to you and for the people who've tuned in. My whole purpose here is to inspire people to a different possibility, to inspire and invite. So I hope I've done that today. If you guys want to find out more about me, you're welcome to check out my website, adrianapopescu.org. I'm across all the social media. I do classes here in San Francisco, and I also travel around the world facilitating classes and individual sessions. I work with people all over the place over Skype and Zoom, and you can find me in the show notes. You'll get links to all of my stuff. Would love to hear from you guys and work with you if you feel called to that.
Definitely. Yes, it'll have all of that information for people to reach out in the show notes. And thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Boo, 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 boo. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast so you can get these episodes downloaded as soon as they're available, please hit the subscribe button. You can also leave a rating and review for the podcast, which helps to grow the show and reach even more listeners. An additional way you can support Rainbows Are Circles is by donating $1 a month to the podcast. Every single dollar counts and ensures that Rainbows Are Circles stays alive and kicking. Just visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/rainbowsarecircles. As a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content at least once a month. For this month, I'll be creating a guided relaxation audio recording to help you unwind at the end of a long day and promote restful sleep. If you'd like to learn more about the show, please check out my website, rainbowsarecircles.com, or you can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the name Rainbows Are Circles. I truly appreciate all of your support, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Until then, have a magical day. Bam, ba-bam, bam, ba-bam, bam. Bam, ba-bam, bam, ba-bam, bam. Wow, 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 wow. Rainbows are circles, yeah.